Aloha, welcome back to another edition of Pewa by Hawaii Community Foundation. Today we're talking with a couple of individuals associated with Roots Reborn. Its mission is dedicated to serving our migrant and immigrant community impacted by the Maui fires. We have co-founder and executive director Vero Mendoza-Jahowski. Thank you for being here. And also Aparna Patri, who is an immigration attorney with the organization. Again, thank you guys for making the time. First question is, how did this organization come to fruition here? What was the impetus behind this effort?
So really, Roots Reborn was born as a response to the fires. We knew that in Lahaina, we had a very large migrant and immigrant population. And coming from that community, we knew that this community was going to have its unique set of challenges in recovery. And so we set up to really respond to the immediate needs, and then knowing that we would need to be around for the long term to make sure that this community's needs were being met and that we were able to, advocate where needed and be able to support them in their recovery process.
Aparna, could you talk a little bit more about exactly the needs, what this organization is looking to fulfill?
The organization is doing a lot of different things for the community, the migrant and immigrant community here. One of the main things that this community needs is legal services. There are a lot of folks in this community who need to find pathways for legal permanent residency, for citizenship, and a variety of other legal services. So part of what we do is identify those and provide them a holistic set of services to make sure that they are able to recover well.
Aparna, if you could maybe specifically talk a little about the key services that are applied here by this organization that have been boosted along by some of the recent funding from HCF.
Sure. So our legal program is a three-prong approach. We have direct legal services that we provide to individuals in need. This is, finding pathways to legal status for folks who are undocumented or forwarding their immigration status further, whether it's from green card to citizen or visa holder to green card, to make them more secure in the environment that we're in. The second is know your rights. And that is something that was born of the recent administration. And we saw a need in our community to understand what their rights are in the face of the policy priorities of the new administration. So we stood up this program in 48 hours, basically. And we have since provided Know Your Rights trainings in a variety of settings, not just to our community, but to schools, to churches, to healthcare facilities, and beyond. And the third is policy advocacy. And our policy advocacy is very hyper-local. There are folks in Oahu, in Honolulu, that are doing kind of state level policy advocacy. Ours is, how do we identify the key players in Maui that our community how do we identify the key players in Maui that have the biggest impacts on our community, develop relationships with them, and make policy changes at the local level that impact the lives of our community. So those are the three ways that we provide legal services to our community.
And I'll add that with that. So actually, our legal aid program was born 9 months after we started Roots Reborn. And in all the things that we do, our focus is recovery. And so, legal aid, that's huge. It's the first nonprofit legal aid program to exist on Maui ever. Wow. Aparna is only the second immigration attorney on island. Right. And then the other immigration attorney is actually a co-founder and is also on our board. So you have this, we identified this as a gap, and we were able to resource that gap in a really meaningful way, while also providing resource navigation, language support, advocacy education at all levels, from the top to the bottom up, as well as, some of the programs that we've been able to launch recently.
And if I can just add to that, 30% of Lahaina is foreign born. We know that. And with 2 immigration attorneys on the entire island of Maui, that just shows you what a huge need there is for immigration legal services on this island, particularly pro bono immigration legal services. And a lot of the folks whose homes were impacted by the fires lived in the communities and the neighborhoods that were largely foreign-born. So the folks that were the most impacted in Lahaina were the immigrant and migrant community in a lot of ways. So this work is hugely important after the fire, and is hugely important particularly after the Trump administration has taken hold.
Yeah, disasters tend to exacerbate some of these existing gaps that you spoke about, Vero. And I'm just wondering where you see perhaps opportunities for further growth here that is born out of this recovery effort for the community that you guys are tending to.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, we really were born as a response to the fires, right? But now we say we do recovery work and beyond, because it definitely extends to, all of Maui was really impacted, not just Lahaina, not just Kula. And we certainly see, and in our work with our community, we definitely see the folks that were indirectly impacted, right? So in terms of the ability to work beyond that, and we're especially feeling it right now with the new administration, it's a lot. It's our community. There is a lot of fear, and that's something that we worked really, really hard early on, was to earn the trust of our community so that we could resource them, because our community has a historical distrust of institutions and authority, or folks that seem like they are authority, and so over the year and a half, we've worked really, really hard to kind of overcome those barriers so that our community can be resourced, however limited those resources might be. And so with the new administration, we are definitely looking at additional layers to that. Our community, immediately after the election, there was a lot of spiraling. They were seeing what they thought were ICE enforcement everywhere, right? And in a couple of cases, we knew it was a DUI checkpoint. Another case, we knew that it was just construction that was happening, and MPD was just directing traffic. But so you have that fear, and on top, and you add the fact that they're survivors and they're trying to recover, and that they're not resourced in meaningful ways, right? Currently, just to be clear, there are a lot of organizations that are doing incredible work, and we're all working, at a deficit. But we know that mental health is a big issue with recovery, and we're in our community, we don't have language access. First of all, we just don't have enough providers, let alone providers that are able to provide their services in language specific. And so everything is really layered in our community, and being able to articulate that to folks is really important.
To speak further about that and the current administration, which appears to be efforting to further vilify immigrants, they are targeting particularly undocumented immigrants. And I'm just wondering how that affects the resistance to what you guys are doing, the rhetoric that is out there. How hurtful is that for you personally, and then having to persevere through that as an organization to try to establish some of the change that you're trying to accomplish?
This organization was born because we saw that immigrants don't bring themselves forward to avail themselves of services. One, because they're not eligible for a lot of services, but two, because they're too afraid to ask for help. And so immigrants were falling through the cracks after recovery, when a lot of money was being poured into Maui and Lahaina to assist in recovery. So we saw the need for this organization and created it as a result. The legal program was born of the idea that a lot of the immigrants that were coming in through our doors actually had 2-3 different types of needs. They might have been coming in for one specific thing, but our staff would identify that they actually could really use help with the lawyer. They actually could really use help with health insurance. They could really use housing. And so a lot of our programs were born of seeing what the needs of the community were as they came through our doors. And I forgot what the rest of the question was.
Well, just about the level, the rhetoric that is out there, and how hurtful that is, and how that creates, further challenges and resistance to what you're doing.
Yeah. It has really set this community back in recovery. I can say that. We've worked so hard to get their trust to trust institutions to help them, to trust us to help them, to bring their names forward, to bring themselves forward. And when we see what this administration is doing, targeting children, targeting individuals that want to do nothing more than just work and provide for their families and stay, that really causes people to do things like not go to school, not go to the grocery store, not go to work. And that's not good for anyone. Immigrants are the lifeblood of the economy, of the Lahaina economy, and Lahaina is not going to come back without the immigrants that live in our community. And when you see things like that happen, that is a setback to recovery. That is not productive.
Vero, Roots Reborn is a grantee of the Hawaii Community Foundation's Maui Strong funds. How has that support helped bolster the efforts for the organization? And specifically, where does some of that funding go?
Yeah. So I would be remiss to not mention that Hawaii Community Foundation was our first grantor. We received our first round of funding from them like 3 days after the fire or something like that. And that basically capacitated us to, it really gave us our wings. And that allowed us, so the other 3 co-founders to Roots Reborn are all attorneys, and they were able to provide pro bono services to help individuals replace really important documents, specifically around immigration, their immigration process. And fast forward to today, we were able to launch the OFF program, so Our Financial Future. And this really, we see this as a lifeline for our community. This year, because a lot of the funding that's come down, we kind of see it might, it's starting to dwindle, and then maybe some additional funding that we're looking at in the future won't be for another long while, right? And with the current administration, we don't know if it'll actually come down, and if it does come down, will it actually be accessible to our community? So we are very, very grateful to the Maui Strong Fund for really listening to what our community has voiced as their needs. And for them, it was access to some things that were not previously available to them, like banking, a lifeline of aid. So in this program, they will receive over the course of about 5 months, $5,000. And this program is also a research project with UHERO. And they will basically look at the impact that financial aid has on specifically in immigrant communities' mental and emotional well-being. So it has been a labor of love to get this program lifted, because, not to say that like Roots is the only one doing this work, but we understand that the needs of our community in a really intimate way. How does that sound?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the real significance of that program is that, our community was storing their savings in cash under their mattresses, just wherever, right? And so while they didn't have evidence of the fact that they had lost so much saved cash, they didn't trust banking institutions. They weren't able to open bank accounts. And so giving them this money is such a hugely impactful thing for a community that lost literally cash in the fire.
And with all of the clients that we have intake that have come through our doors, we always do kind of like a comprehensive intake, initial comprehensive intake. And we've accounted that for the survivors that we've connected with to date, we've accounted for $2.4 million lost in cash. And so, whether that's because they distrusted, banking institutions, or they didn't have access to banking, this is something that the Maui Strong Foundation grant that we received is contributing to, which is in. Not only is it life-changing short term, because they get that immediate need, but it sets them up long term. And it's a commitment to local recovery. Yes, to our community, but also to local recovery.
That is significant. I mean, that is a huge number, what you were saying, as far as the cash value that was lost within this community from the fallout of the Lahaina fires. Are there other real life impacts that you've already been able to see here over the course of the last several months from your efforts, and whether they are tied to this funding from Hawaii Community Foundation or not? What are those real life impacts?
So actually, we just finished a presentation with a presentation, and that presentation, it was an opportunity for us to sit down and look at some of the impacts that we've had over the last year and a half, and we can see very clearly that we've been effective in closing the gap in healthcare access, thanks to our partnership with Kaiser. Kaiser has a program called the Hawaii Health Access Program, HHAP, and this provides folks that qualify free health insurance, 100% subsidized. And so for our community, this is something that's just simply not available to them. And so we have folks that are in the program who are in their 40s and 50s and going to the doctor for the first time in their lives.
Wow.
This is the first time they're actually insured in their lives. So we see a positive impact there. And we also see the gap being closed in terms of housing. So our community being housed in more long-term sustainable housing. And that's, thanks to Hawaii interim housing program that the state run. But oftentimes when these resources become available, we're the ones that are helping our community apply for those resources and ensuring that it is, if there is any legal question, so if there's any risk to their status, that we are able to vet that with Aparna, and that we are able to give sound advice, because we would never put our community in harm's way.
How important are those kinds of partnerships, like what you're saying with Kaiser and with these other entities, especially with what you're talking about, this evolution with what could be potential nonprofit organization funding from the federal government? How important are those partnerships, and how does Roots Reborn pivot perhaps under some of those changes?
We are not able to meaningfully resource our community if those resources don't come down from partner, whether it's a partner organization or institutions like Kaiser. It takes people like Kaiser and Maui Strong Fund that have the resources, meaningful, to actually move the needle. That's what it requires to actually have an impact. So, one of the pillars for Roots Reborn is reciprocal trust. We say that. Often people will ask us, how did you build trust with your community? How did you guys do it? And yes, we've built that trust with our community, but our community trusts us also, right? And it's reciprocal. And I think we take that in all that we do and all the relationships that we're building with community partners like Kaiser, right? We were new, right? And they made us a community partner because they wanted to reach our community, and they took a chance on us, and it paid off for everyone, right? And same thing with Maui Strong Fund, right? We're new, and the funding that we received is substantial enough that it's going to make we expect to see a really positive impact on that. And so relationships are really important, and that reciprocal trust really exists. And we can only serve our community, or our limitations. There are limitations to how well we're able to serve and resource our community based on what resources are made available to them, right? So
I was just going to say, going back to a question that you asked earlier about what impacts have we seen from the work that we've done, I just wanted to, mention from the legal services side of things, there are actually a lot of undocumented folks in the country and in this state that are eligible for certain types of immigration relief and just don't know it yet, because they've been so afraid to seek it out, or have gotten bad advice from, perhaps attorneys or folks sort of posing to be immigration attorneys who have given them bad advice. And when you can identify a way for someone to come out of the shadows and get on a pathway towards legal status, that is life-changing for themselves and their family and their broader family, their broader community. We have people come into our office just crying when they get a letter that basically says, I see that you have a case, and please wait for the next letter in which we will ask you to come in for your fingerprints, and sort of basically saying, that there's a pathway for them. And a lot of people just don't know that, information. And part of what we do is kind of sit down with every client and try to figure out what possible avenue could you have. You've been here 30, 40 years, you've worked the whole time. You, might have been brought here when you were 5 years old. What can we figure out for you? And we can't always, but in the instances when we do, and when we can move forward, it's completely life-changing for that family.
And I think for me, it's important to also just kind of clarify, we're talking about legal aid, which some people might think how is that, Parna articulated why that's important to recovery, but I just want to emphasize that recovery almost cannot exist, right, without this legal representation, legal advocacy, the advocacy work that we're doing with Know Your Rights. It goes hand in hand. It's inseparable. And if we're going to continue to serve our community in a meaningful way, we have to make sure that there is that legal sound guidance for all aspects, while also discovering different ways to create paths of relief for our community.
Do you see this advocacy continuing on well past the recovery effort for the Lahaina fires within this community? Is there now more perhaps of a long-term strategy that is being brewed up here for Roots Reborn to impact this community for future generations?
Yeah, really recovery is long-term. We're looking at least 10 years, right? And for sure, with the work that we're doing, as I said earlier, it's impacted the whole entire island. And when you're talking about a community who is, before the fires was experiencing poverty, and now after the fires they're experiencing extreme poverty, there is going to be a need for our services. And we hope that our community sees the value in having an organization like Roots Reborn around.
Yeah, I was just going to say disasters just shine a light on these systemic issues that already exist in a community. That's what they do. And that's what this disaster has done, right? There were all of these underlying systemic issues here that this disaster brought to light. And this gives us an opportunity to look at those systemic issues and try to figure out solutions to them for the long term. A big part of what we've been doing is actually going to other islands and working with immigrant organizations in other islands to help them with their work as well. And that really is a testament to me of kind of the long-term project that we're building here.
All right, how can people get more information about what you do? How can people learn more about your organization and your community?
Yeah, so they can go to our website. Our website is rootsreborn.org. They can always email us at help@rootsreborn.org. And certainly we welcome calls and actually texts as well. Our community loves to text. You can text us at 808-707-8892.
Before we wrap up here, and again, thank you guys so much for making the time. I think this is such an important discussion, and truly appreciate what you do. But I want to give you the floor here. What else would you like to say? There seems to be a certain framing of the migrant and immigrant community that paints that community in a very negative way. How would you respond to some of that? And what else would you like people to know about you, about this community?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think our program, the ethos of our program is the idea that everyone has the right to protect their family and better their family situation, right? That's something that every human being wants. Everyone wants to do that, wants to make sure that they and their family are safe and that they're giving their family the best opportunities they can in life. And, the Trump administration has put out a lot of rhetoric about how immigrants are criminals and how they're invading our country. And I just have to say, the clients that we see, 99.9% of them have no criminal record. That is just not what we are seeing among the folks that we are providing services to. We are seeing folks who are simply hardworking, trying to simply make a better life for themselves, and trying to give back and provide provide the community, give back to the community as well. And so I think it's important to make sure that what people hear maybe on social media and other places, that information is vetted and that people not take what they're hearing at face value.
I'd just like to add also that what we see through our doors also includes a lot of families. And so a lot of the work that we do now, that the Trump administration is in office, is protecting family units because, detention means family separation. And so the reality is that Roots Reborn is holding workshops for family preparedness. We're having to have the difficult conversations with our community members saying, who are you going to entrust your child, your minor child to, should you become detained? Who is your power of attorney to have access to your funding, so your bank account or your resources, so that if you're detained, they can bail you out, right? These are parents, these are families, and those conversations are really difficult. And then we have to say, and you have to have these conversations with your minor children who are, we're talking 0 to 18, 19, 20, 21, because, our kiddos live at home, but that is what that looks like. So it's really, it's impacting families. And I think that's really important for our community, and those, everyone who's out there to understand,
I think very important conversation, and I just want to say, Vero and Aparna, thank you for taking the time and being on Kapeva.
Oh, thank you for having us.